Do us a favor and reintroduce yourself to our audience.
Hello, my name's Anthony Reale. I am a professor of product design at the College for Creative Studies. I've been a designer most of my life. I have designed over 600 products that have made it into production. I've designed things in and around the transportation industry, and I'm here today to talk about the future of mobility within Aptera and what the future of urban mobility looks like.
Thank you, and thanks for coming back. And we're going to talk about what Aptera is. Is it a car? Is it a bike? What are we talking about here? We're going to get some examples from one of your students, which I'm looking forward to learning more about that. But first, Anthony, I want to read you some of the comments we got because we had a really good response from our last visit. First was Michael Bramwell. He's one of our channel members. He says, "This was a fascinating conversation." Like, yeah, just a couple of words, but that's how I felt after talking to you a couple of weeks ago. It was a fascinating conversation.
Your users. I went down into the comments with them, and there was a lot of smart people in those comments, a lot of educated people on this topic. And one of the things that happened after our last conversation was my students responded. I probably had about 4 hours worth of conversations one-on-one, and that got me really passionate about coming back and delivering more content, things that they would be interested in, things that you guys would be interested in, and possibly showing you guys some things that you've never seen before because they were just drawn.
That's so cool. Here's another comment. Fantastic interview. The conversation was a lot of fun. I hope you can have Anthony back again. Well, here he is. Last one. This is my favorite. This sums up my relationship with social media as a whole right here. I don't normally watch this channel. That's how it started. And I thought, yeah, neither do I. The guest and subject matter make it imperative to watch. Excellent information and explanation of why Aptera will be such a quality built vehicle. Great job on getting this informative guest. Professor Anthony Reale rocks. That's my kind of people.
Yeah, and your commenters rock too. I really appreciated all the positive feedback. It makes it easy to go out there and participate in a conversation when it's productive dialogue
Yeah,
afterwards.
yeah.
Yeah.
It occurs to me, Professor, you're teaching people that are going to be seriously concerned with what public transportation looks like when they get my age or even a little younger. And so I want to talk a little bit about what transportation might look like. And I'd like to do it through the eyes of one of your students, if that's okay.
Absolutely. So to give you guys a little background, part of the classes that I teach are studio classes. We get paired with different industries. So for example, the last studio that we just finished up was with Trek Bike. And we were asked to, by them, their brief they gave all the students was, what does urban mobility look like in 2035
Okay.
for the age demographic 35 to 50?
Okay.
So a little bit young, a little bit old. So what does 15 years to 20 years in their future look like to them? And so real interesting in-depth kind of concepts. We had students coming up with large infrastructure style projects, small infrastructure projects. We had different types of accessories that helped commuters in their commute and in their daily transportation. The goal of getting more riders on bikes, that's one of Trek's goals. And how does that align? And what was really interesting was some of the parallels between Aptera and the market segment that it kind of creates and what the students were able to come up with.
Yeah. Let me bring this up here.
The student by the name, his name's Eric. I told him I'd give him a shout out. So shout out to all the screaming peacocks that are out there watching. It's the school mascot, screaming peacocks. He named his bike the Aptus because it was apt and smart, had nothing to do with Aptera, just close kind of play off of it, right?
Very good.
And one of his big breakthroughs is when you get to your final destination, you don't want to be sweaty, you don't want to be overwhelmed, you want to arrive to work ready to work and in a professional way. So some of his big breakthroughs that he kind of saw, you can go ahead and scroll through, He came up with three different designs, and they're there on the page. And what he's showing there, the one on the left, that's just with a single battery installed into it. If you need a little further range, he's saying, hey, this is where another battery drops in. And then if you need even more range, he's got option 3, which is for laptop storage and like an extended range battery even further. So
Oh,
as part of the design process, they go through different iterations trying to figure out how they can package up all these different things. What would it mean to that commuter's engagement, how they physically engage with the bike, what would feel about right, what would look about right to the end user. So in this one, he's got a direct drivetrain to a transmission in the back, and it's a conical kind of gear shaped transmission. Now, right now, that gear and straight drivetrain exists. It's about like $2,000, $3,000 for that drivetrain for a bicycle.
wow.
Okay. He's hoping in the future that price would go down in terms of how that's shifting, but it creates a nice clean transition because he didn't want people's dress pants getting caught up in the gears of the bike.
Yeah,
Right.
smart.
Right. So they're thinking about, what would a commuter want? What would a commuter need? And how is it kind of solving that last mile? Real clean interface, right? They've got some simple UI, UX control on the actual handlebars of the bike, where it's telling them maybe speed and battery charge, real simple. Some blinkers on the outer edges, left and right. And these types of designs that you're seeing, this is like stage 1 design for a product like this. Not all the little bells and whistles are completely resolved. And again, this is their first crack at coming up with this concept after doing research just for a semester.
Wow.
So it's really interesting. Yeah, and so we teach them how to design, iterate, create all these 3D models or hand sketches to create this level of content. But very, very similar process is done for vehicles like the Aptera. Thousands of sketches are probably generated just to come up with those final forms, iterations in different shapes.
Wow.
And that's what's really unique about the program that I work within. We design things like robots and shoes. Like next semester, students will have an opportunity to work on robots. We're doing a sponsor study with New Balance. We've got a special travel package. It's really, really, really cool what we're doing.
Wow, that is really amazing. I was just scrolling through that before we got on because you sent me that in advance, and it's such a professional pitch. I was like, where do I invest? I mean, where's the button to, I mean, something looks like it's ready to go to me, It's really, your students are doing amazing work.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. If you ever want to see more work that my students do, you can link to anthonyreale.com. There's a link on my webpage,
There's a
and
link
you
in the
can see all.
description.
Yep, you can see all that stuff there.
Yeah, very cool. So let's talk a little bit about Aptera. People, I get comments all the time like, is this a car? Is a motorcycle? The DMVs, or we have here called the Secretary of State, or OMVs, whatever they are in your state. It's classified as an auto cycle. So it's not a car. It's not a motorcycle. It's definitely in its own unique category.
It is. And, one of the things about future mobility is as city centers get more densely populated, access with automobiles might not be something that you can do. So getting a vehicle that allows you to get to as close as you can, park it in a comfortable, convenient spot, and have that last mile, 1 to 2 mile range that you need to get, you can fit a bicycle right in the back of that Aptera, right? So part of how that vehicle is structured starts to fit this vision of what future mobility may need to make concessions for, right? Especially, in Michigan, downtown Detroit, we don't have a very robust commuter system, right? And so anything to get you that last little bit of the way there, once you're parking at the parking structure that's, say $10 a day versus $25 a day, there's definitely a savings to be found, especially in the urban environments.
Yeah, for sure. And that's a good, I like the way you said that. We have to, transportation can't think, how can I solve every situation for every municipality?
Hmm.
But instead, maybe they should think, what can I do that could be an add-on or a modular that will allow me to participate in commuting in every municipality? And we used to live in Louisiana for a while, and when the river got high, because we were right on the Mississippi River, people would have to, their houses were up on stilts on that side of the
Okay.
levee because every year there's like 20 or 30 feet of water underneath their house. So they would drive to the levee, get in their boat, row to their house. So that's not
That's
the way
wild.
they had hoped
Yeah.
to commute forever, but they've been doing it for generations that way. So you're not going to solve every problem with any one design, but if you can be a little bit modular, like your student's bike, I can
Hmm.
add battery, I can add more battery, I can add storage, I can have a design that doesn't get my dress if I wear a dress or my suit pants if I wear that into the chain. All of that stuff in some iteration solves the issue.
And where Aptera fills the gap where the e-bike lives off is because it has that enclosed cabin, right?
Big deal.
So
Yeah,
so the further north you go when it's rain and snow and blustery days, like that is excellent, right?
excellent.
Yeah,
It's a big deal. And
it
that
is.
enclosed cabin also takes away the need for a helmet. And Aptera, they're going to have airbags. They're doing everything they can to be as safe as vehicle possible. So obviously, if you're on a motorcycle, I would recommend you wear a helmet, whether it's illegal or not. But in the Aptera, I would not, because the loss of visibility is not getting me any extra protection because I have airbags. I have that shell that's almost impenetrable. So
And
it's just a cool thing.
and it's interesting because it's classified as an auto cycle. There's already legislation in place that gives it advantages in certain areas, like in our area, the shared commuter lane, right?
Right.
You either have to be more than one passenger or a motorcycle to use that lane, and Aptera falls within the auto cycle.
It's
So
awesome.
as cities get more dense, I'm sure more of that type of legislation is going to hit, and Aptera may get to take advantage of those types of laws, which would be
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah. So, Anthony, like me, you've been following Aptera for a while, and as you know, there's been some adjustments. This was going to be the launch edition was going to be three-wheel drive, all with in-wheel
Mhm.
motors for a while. And when that wasn't practical or didn't make as much sense to get it on the road with fewer parts, they went with a single motor with axles and two-wheel drive. At one time, they thought maybe we wouldn't even need DC fast charging, but then the community said, oh, yes, we do. And that changed in like a day, which was nice because we got to talk to Chris Anthony about it on this channel right afterwards. And now we're seeing something else. Let me bring up my screen here. Let's talk through this. Okay, Anthony, what are we looking at, Professor?
So this is the InMotive in-gear two-speed EV transmission, and a couple big key takeaways. First, as we see it kind of cycle around there, if you notice, it is split up into 5 segments. So within a 72-degree segment, this thing can change from a low speed to high speed gear. And when they first said that they were making a transmission in the Aptera they were going to be using in transmission, I freaked out.
Me
I'm like,
too.
no. I'm like, why? I'm like, what are you doing? Why are you doing? And then I saw it and I'm like, oh, this is a transmission, but it's not a transmission,
Okay.
right? It's more akin to like the bicycle derailleur
Oh,
that
yeah.
is
Yeah.
right. That is between your two big gears when it's switching from high gear to low gear when there's like a wind load. That's typically when you switch, but you don't want to change your gears lower on your cassette. What this transmission does really well, and you've got it paused on the screen right now, is when it is transferring from the outer ring to the inner ring, it is touching both the inner sprocket and the outer sprocket with the same chain,
Oh, I see it right there. Yeah. In green.
which
Hmm.
which means probably less than a millisecond or maybe 3 milliseconds where there would be any point where the chain's not fully engaged. And you're like, why is this important? Why do you, Anthony, know about transmissions? Okay.
That was my
Um,
question.
right. So, going to skip ahead for a second. Um, I was part of a team that designed a transmission flusher tool. So when you would bring your transmission into for service and repair, basically you would hook it up to this machine and it would heat up around 16 quarts of trans fluid. And for those of you that have never smelled warm or old trans fluid, it stinks. It stinks like dirty fish.
Awful.
It is awful. It heats it up. It would push it in there. It would agitate it. It would pulse all of that trans liquid on the inside, and then it would drain it out and then put new transmission fluid in, run it through a filter until it cleaned that entire transmission. So wow. That was part of the tool set that I worked on. I also worked on a shim selector set for multiple transmissions. So when you rebuild transmissions, not every case is identical. Not every bearing housing gets worn out the same. And you need to know what size shim to place in between there so that when you rebuild that transmission, it goes back together at factory spec or better. Okay. Wow. And so there is a ton of parts to have in a transmission. There's a high pressure pump. I don't see any of this in this 2-speed transmission.
That makes me feel better because I've known for a long time as a guy who wrenches his own cars, I'm never going to crack open a transmission. I'm never going to attempt it. We have shops here in Grand Rapids that are just for transmissions. That's all they do because it's enough. Mm-hmm. It's like 1,500 parts in some of these things or more. So just the word transmission just makes me feel uneasy. And when I saw that Aptera was going this route, like you, I was like, whoa, let's keep it simple here. Let's get this thing on the road. I drive a no transmission EV. I have no problems with it. The BMW i3, the Nissan Leaf. We just bought a Chevy Bolt. No problem with these things. Mm-hmm. So I'm like, why are we doing this?
Well,
help me understand.
So even if we compare this current transmission to like a CVT transmission. So I worked on some of the early CVT transmissions that have this really, we'll just call it a piece of jewelry. The chain on it is like this herringbone chain, and it floats between these two V-shaped plates. And even then, there's not enough gear ratio. They still have like 1, 2, or 3 additional gears in that transmission that helps kind of shift between this floating point on the CVT style. What I like about this transmission is it's really meant to kick on just before you get to highway speeds. And why is that significant? It is significant because at around 45 miles an hour, air starts to behave more and more like water. So the majority of the fluid and aerodynamics on an Aptera, the greatest benefit is at highway speeds. And early on, you hear them always talking about at highway speeds. It doesn't mean as much at lower speeds to be as aerodynamic as possible. So where could we make some additional gains? I don't know if you've ever tried to blend ice before in a blender. Yeah. If you started on a low speed, your motor is going to overheat, and oftentimes the blender will shut off. So electrical motors, they like to run fast. They like to go fast. They like to spin at high RPMs. You give them the juice, they got a lot of torque, and away they go. Okay. So when they're sizing a motor for an electrical vehicle, there's probably a sweet spot, and they're probably targeting somewhere in the middle. Right. A 2-speed transmission allows them to spin the motor faster at a low with the smaller gear. Okay, which means the motor is under less stress because it's in its efficiency belt. It's producing less heat from resistance, right? Mm-hmm. Less heat from resistance. So the motor runs more efficiency at lower speeds. So at lower speeds, if we wanted to make gains in the Aptera, that would mean we'd have to leverage the electrical motor more gently. All right. Okay. And then when we hit that 45 mile an hour range heading towards highway speeds, it's going to go ahead and click into that larger gear. So it still keeps spinning around the same RPM where it's in its most efficient peak RPM speed. and it'll carry you through onto highway speeds. So you're balancing out the RPM needed at high speeds with the RPM that you like to run at, but also doing it at low speeds. And that's why I'm saying this is more like a bicycle transmission derailleur than a traditional car transmission. There's no high pressure pump. There's no like clutch plate. It's really minimal in comparison.
Will this thing be soaked in fluid? I mean, will there be?
I'm gonna say yeah. There's definitely fluid in there, and the reason is when I saw the design, there's a gasket going all the way around.
There it is.
So
yeah, okay.
they're definitely trying to keep liquid on the inside. That would be the only thing that I didn't quite like, is that I have to deal with the fluid. Although transmission fluids, you can get them to go like 90,000 miles before you need a service. The other thing that's really of note, it's $150 part. So is it worth rebuilding, or is it worth just sending off to get remanufactured and just putting a new one in? Right.
Yeah, right.
It is so cost effective and tiny. If you've seen, like, some vehicles have a 6-speed transmission, some of them, like some of the big semis I've worked on, you got a 16-speed transmission, right? They're big, giant,
massive.
This is just a little guy, right?
Yeah.
Pops right on. It's nothing that you couldn't handle bolting on and bolting off if you had to swap it out. So
You could return it like a core charge, like you do with your alternator or your starters. We'll give you $30 when you send this thing back to us. Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
So downside, it is more parts. It is more moving parts. It's
Yes.
a negligible amount, I would say, of weight. And then the upside is, if I understood what you're saying correctly, it's going to increase the efficiency even beyond the early projections by another, who knows, 10, 15%. I don't know exactly yet.
Yeah.
Reduce motor wear.
Yeah, I would guess, and this is me just guessing. I would say, 10%, but it at the lower RPM. So when they came up with their range figures, right, their range figures has to kind of cover at highway speeds all the way down to like slow commuting speeds. But, a lot of auto manufacturers, when they tell you what the range is, like, they're doing absolutely everything to minimize the amounts of negatives going against them. Like it was all downhill or all uphill, and it was with no one else in the car and that type of thing. But this type of strategy allows us to be more efficient through different dynamic environments. So cool. Really like that. I really, really like that.
Very cool. So one of the big selling points for Aptera is always this off the grid. Now we hear that way too much from everybody. Off the grid. What does it really mean? But I don't think anybody before Aptera, at least here in the US, has really given a serious shot, taken a crack at a car, gas or diesel, that will fuel itself somehow, just sitting still. It doesn't even make sense. So for it to even come up into our minds is silly. And then for years we've talked about solar cars. There's the solar racers we love. Of course, in Michigan, the Ann Arbor team, they're amazing, the U of M. But we never really think of it as a passenger vehicle, because once you add weight and you add friction and all the things it takes to make a legal vehicle on the road, solar made no sense. But now Aptera comes along and say, wait a minute, if we shape it like this and we do 3 wheels, less rolling resistance, all of a sudden we might have a car that's kind of off the grid.
It is. And, it's that combination of really good design ethos, taking in the weight of the vehicle, the aerodynamics of the vehicle, the sizing of the battery package, understanding the rolling resistance, understanding the needs, fitting into a niche that isn't currently occupied by another automaker or by some of these other vehicles, these sub-market vehicles or sub-segment vehicles. Like it is living in its own space, and its ability to take little from the grid to nothing from the grid is a very, very unique hallmark that currently I have not seen anyone else that is going to do it in a very meaningful way.
Let's take on some of our comments we had from our last talk here. So this one came in from Steven. Except for extended traveling, I don't expect to ever have to charge my Aptera at a charging station. A home solar-based battery setup will allow me to charge my Aptera during daylight hours or at night. Sure, there'll be some loss losses charging batteries that'll be used to charge other batteries, but there's always a price to pay for peace of mind. Power, independence, and lower carbon footprint are notable goals. No vehicle or energy production will be totally green because of embedded energy consumption in the mining and manufacturing and transportation of building materials used in the manufacturing processes. We can only hope to limit our damage and provide a catalyst for future improvements and innovations. Supporting products like the Aptera helps us figure out what next steps could be taken. You've got to learn to walk before you can learn to run. I really like that comment for a lot of reasons. One, the realism in it. It's like, yes, we're trying to do this green, but we can't fool ourselves into thinking we're going to be able to do it perfectly right yet. And then the other thing was, and I never really thought of this until I read that comment, and I love your thoughts on this, Aptera as a stepping stone to what's next.
Absolutely, and I think that commenter really nailed down some of the subtleties in the conversation when it comes to the full sustainability of a product. Because like even right now, the Aptera is using like a lithium base in the battery, but like battery tech is changing quickly, very, very quickly. Even with like some of the sodium batteries that are out there that aren't using any real precious metals in them, and those they've yet to be proven out, right? But they're starting to come online. So if we think of Aptera as a platform, and it's a company that is always thinking of the future, right? You can easily see them in the future when those technologies are proven out, putting in these different types of hybrid battery systems that are significantly more sustainable. And on the sustainability end of the lithium can be recycled. And the amount of lithium battery recycling plants is increasing. So once we have mined that resource from the ground, we don't have to go back to the ground to continue to pull it. We can keep recycling it over and over again. And some of those recycling processes now are between 80 to 90% efficient in reclaiming all of those minerals back.
That's amazing.
There's an initial cost. There's definitely initial cost to the environment, but we are getting back at closing that circle of product life cycle. You know, we talked cradle to grave last episode.
That's right.
And this is part of that circular loop into the sustainability story, which keeps getting better with time.
It does. You look at, like you just mentioned, battery tech. If you go back 5 years, we're talking about stuff no one was talking about 5 years ago. And then if you look at solar technology, these panels are so much more efficient, are capturing so much more energy than just 5 or 10 years ago. So what's going to be 10 years from now when your students are working at Aptera and refining the process for their students, you know?
So you know, to kind of play off of what was proposed by that viewer, like in the future, if I had like a future like glasses, I would love to see like an Aptera carport-ish thing in my driveway that I could take with me when I move, that had additional battery storage on it where I could charge both my house and my Aptera and use that as some of the power transfer. I would love for them to get into that, you know, solar mobility space. But I want them to make the car first.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, we can't. Right? But that's what the commenter was saying. Hey, what's next? But let's do this. Let's take out another comment here. Okay, so this is Charlie. The professor does not address how LED street lighting changes the potential for level 2 charging. Forward-thinking communities in Europe are already using the excess capacity created by using LED street lighting. Any community not changing their lighting to LED is missing out on huge savings and the opportunity for street level 2 charging. Now, this was based on your comment last time we talked, when you're talking about virtual cities and what does everybody want? They want to be able to charge. And you mentioned how difficult it is, or impossible maybe currently, to do level 2 charging up and down every street at streetlights. I thought this was an interesting comment. Give you a chance to tackle that.
So Charlie brought up some really good points. Yes, if you have a street, so a current high pressure sodium light bulb that would be on the street, let's say it's like 600 watts, right? When you do the LED version of that, you knock it down, you can get anywhere between 100 watt to a 60 watt LED to produce the same amount of light. So there's definitely space on that circuit, right?
Okay.
Part of the problem is that circuit that's set up and run out there, it is metered by the entire street length, typically, right? So if we were to put a charging station attached at any of those points, we would then have to figure out, well, who's paying for the electrons and which electrons went where. So it's not so much that the infrastructure couldn't be pulled at those points, it's that there's no way of seeing who used what electrons at meter grade. The other problem with it, if we end up drawing a bunch of light draws on these lighting systems, it can affect and have a dimming or strobing effect on the actual street. And we wouldn't want to impair the lighting environment that is out there. So there's a little risk in that level of infrastructure. And then lastly, sometimes the street light isn't where the parking space is, right? So lining those two things up, like I want to charge where that light is, doesn't always meet the city's plan the best. I love the idea of tapping into that extra energy. I think it's absolutely imperative that every city in North America should be running LEDs outside. It is a huge cost savings if they're not.
Yeah.
But there's a little bit of getting into the weeds or down the rabbit hole when you're hooking up to large infrastructure. And it's definitely different with different communities. So getting community buy-in, getting the power companies buy-in. Sometimes they're willing to give certain levels of charging, like level 1 charging away for free, or at a reduced rate or at a limited time on one of those circuits is definitely more viable. But like getting up, past level 1 would be really tricky.
And again, the Aptera part on that spot is going to be charging itself, at least at level 1, but level 1 charging for Aptera is getting you more miles than level 2 charging is in my Nissan Leaf.
Absolutely.
So, but anyway, great comment again. So we've discussed a lot today, Professor, how we have to design, not me, you and other designers, have to design to try to meet people where they are. And if that means we have to be modular, and if we have to think different about something as simple as a bicycle, which... the bicycle's been a bicycle forever. Now you've got a student that says, why? Why can't it have 1 battery, 2 batteries, or 3 batteries? Why can't it have storage for my laptop next to a battery? Why can't it be something you can actually wear if you go to worship services on Sunday, for example, in your suit? It's so nice to see people are thinking about what people are doing and what they want to do and how you can design to meet that.
If I can I assign homework? Is that all right?
Well, I guess you're a professor. I don't think I have, legally, I don't think I can stop you.
So I would love to know what you think your 2035 commute's going to look like. So if you want to share in this conversation, think about the future, think about 15 years, what the city around you might be like. We would love to know what your condition is going to be.
Okay. And Professor, feel free to jump in the comments and grade those papers as they come in, just grade them. This is a D idea. This is,
No, all ideas are good because we can learn from them. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. There's so much more to talk about. I hope you'll come on again because our audience really enjoys learning from you, as do I. And we appreciate you and what you're doing.
No, thank you very much. It was a pleasure being here.
Hey, thank you so much for the members of the channel. You keep the wheels turning on the Positively Charged YouTube channel. You're so appreciated. For those who buy us coffee, those who bought silly shirts to help support us, we really appreciate you. Thank you so much. What a great conversation with Professor Reale. In fact, I'm going to link to the last time we talked. So if you didn't get a chance to see that, there's even more details there that add to this conversation. Check it out.